Happy Friday, everyone. Let's keep this going like we have been talking about precious metals at least once a week. It's, people say, well, it's not really for everyone. I would argue, well, I think you should talk to your advisor, your broker, and ask them, maybe it should be in part of my portfolio because something's certainly happening. When we see this kind of, even in precious metals volatility, a lot of action, a lot of price increase. I mean, silver's had quite a year. It's having quite a day as well. And our lead kind of article or topic is this announcement from Samsung about a silver solid state battery. Is that helping to push this story along? Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it's certainly an interesting development, and we're not going to go into in depth about how this battery works, but it's certainly impressive with a 600-mile range, lifespan of about 20 years. It's going to have about 5 grams of silver in it. So that means annual demand could reach 16,000 metric tons. That would represent about 64% of current global production. Now, of course, like all batteries, not everyone's switching to one type of battery, and that's end of story. There'll be different solutions for different environments, different types of vehicles, and certainly as technology advances, we'll see the battery technology grow as well. We've seen a big slowdown in a lot of the battery side of things as far as sales of EVs. But in part, that's just because there hasn't been enough of a actual strategy and build out of what that's going to look like. And that's not a criticism of any government or anyone, is that the idea of that adoption and massive infrastructure play is enormous. I mean, it truly is. It would be quite an engineering logistics enterprise that's going to require certainly not, and I'll speak for Canada, the people we've got in charge today. They would be completely unable to grasp at some sort of plan to do that. I'm very confident in saying that. I don't care who that pisses off. But if you want their ideological push of this green transition, of demand in batteries and whatnot, they haven't laid out a plan as to how that's going to happen. And that's part of the issue that's happening. Now, it's one thing, this one energy transition, which is helping to drive a lot of price action and precious metals as well. The silver, that being a big portion in solar panels. We've talked about that before. We had Andy Sheckman on, who is a fantastic resource. Lots of YouTube videos out with Andy in regard to gold and silver. And of course, we've talked with Peter Krauth here in Canada, here in Vancouver, who is like Mr. Silver. And of course, Chris Marcus down in the States, who is a trader and certainly looks every day is watching the COMEX and watching silver trade actively. And, obviously these people are having the time of their lives as silver has been crushing and dominating and doing very well. And these things don't happen just by chance. Markets react this way because there's change. And we're talking about mining, like base metals, precious metals. These are quote unquote extremely boring and tiny markets in comparison to, of course, AI, technology, anything related, chips. These are massive undertakings of infrastructure and of design, and of course, critical importance. The issue is that it just takes a long time before people realize that these are married together. That you don't get any of these chips unless you have the energy to make them, which requires all the metals to get that going. And that is eventually going to trickle down. And it doesn't matter, as far as, change in governments in any country, there's trillions already in action, slotted for and moving into this transition. Does it mean it's going to happen overnight? Of course not. Does it mean we're going to stop using oil and gas? Of course not. So this isn't a promotion of one party, one this, one that. It's the recognition that we are going to do a transition, and that's a good thing because we need to have more tools in the tool belt as far as energy. And for me, if we have a better solution that just means cleaner air, all right, great. And once again, that doesn't take anything away from the fact that the oil and gas industry has done quite a bit on decreasing emissions and doing a better job. even during this period of time, the last 4 years, where because of the narrative, you'd think there'd be less use, because of a lot of the purposeful blockades put up in oil and gas by federal governments to stop investing. A lot of the ESG movement is trying to stop banks from putting any money in. That is not happening. A lot of that's being pushed back, and of course, oil and gas has grown quite a bit in the last 4 years in the U.S., despite what people might think. So I think that the smartest conversation to have in regards to all of that is just, let's get back to the middle of things, and let's try to loosen some of the narrative and ideological spin on things, and think of things just very simply. If you've got something that might be a bit cleaner, more efficient, and it's within a reasonable cost range, hey, let's do it. Let's use it. And these new solid state silver batteries, they could be a great new addition into the whole rung of batteries that will help. Now, I think that this is an interesting topic, but I don't think it's a real driver as to the silver story. I think solar panels certainly is the number one. And then, of course, there's many other little factors. And, we've mentioned Peter Crowther, Chris Marcus. I mean, you could go to David Morgan as well. They are intimately aware of all things silver. Their channels and their YouTubes will go in depth about them. But, we look at even some small nuances, like in regards to Mexico, where already they've put into Congress another look at whether they should ban open pit mining. Now, of course, anyone who's already there, like First Majestic, I'm sure they're grandfathered in. They are fine. It wouldn't affect them. But any new mines would start thinking, well, wait a second, why should I be in Mexico anymore? And Mexico is a massive silver mining area. If you start banning types of mining, how exactly are we going to get this silver that's going to be for solid state batteries? So there seems to be a big, huge disconnect between the same people who are championing the ESG movement or the kind of transition movement, but also then curtailing it aggressively. And that is a larger kind of topic that I just like to throw out there because it's very curious. My argument would be, and we'll talk more about silver in a minute, is that the ESG movement is just an oxymoron. You can't have the E with the S and G. If there truly is a catastrophic world-changing event where our planet's at risk due to climate change or whatever notion that you have, that means you'd put pretty much everything. Like if there's an asteroid hurtling towards you, like that movie Armageddon, you're going to do everything you can in order to get that out of your way and for the Earth to survive. You would find that whether you have, we've gone through a lockdown where we didn't see appropriate response of a nature that we should have seen if there was an end of world scenario where everyone's going to pass away. We didn't see anything to illustrate that narrative that they tried to sell. We are fine as that this is the same narrative, and there's no way for us to judge it. But the actions of those who are telling us are at odds. If you're saying, well, we don't want to recognize that we need mining, even though we need the metals, but we're going to make it so hard for you to get a permit, and we're also going to make it that if someone's concerned about water or this or that, despite the tons of studies done against it, that you can stall a project or stop it altogether. That would tell me that the efforts and the importance on the social aspect overriding an environmental one means that that's more important. So it isn't about climate or environment. And that's something we have to look at very, very seriously, is that these are competing interests, E, S, and G. If you look at it from a more critical standpoint, and I don't mean that you just do things a proper way. That's the way I would look at it just on the surface, is, of course, listen, you want to make sure all stakeholders are happy and you're doing things right, and you're doing things clean, and I mean, those are obvious things. And in Canada, we've had that for quite some time. But that's not how it's played out. And we're not seeing that even today, how that's being played out. It's still that you can have a project stopped entirely, very quickly and very easily. And the length of time to get a mine going is so astronomically long. and no one's doing anything about it. If there was a complete end of world scenario, or that all these terrible things that they're saying may happen, if that was true, there would be a push, a massive push, in order to get these minerals out of the ground so we could have the solid state batteries, we could have more solar panels, we could be applying all of these things on a global scale at a rapid rate. And can it be done? 100%. Of course it can. We can see it's being done in China. They're building out, they've got 11 new reactors coming online. They're doing things at a breakneck speed. Now, is China different than the West? Well, of course it is. They're authoritarian, and they're Communist Party. They have a lot of luxuries of not having to worry about any of the ESG discussion, or ruminations about poor environments to work in. So they can kind of plow forward. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. certainly, and the West overall, hasn't had that type of aggressive approach in the past, that they were able to unify and push forward with an accelerated program in order to make all of these things possible. And it's 100% possible. It absolutely is. Are there competing interests at stake? Of course there are. But that's a bigger conversation. It's something we have to look at very hard. And then when you have that, if you do have it, that you say, listen, if we all put our heads forward and we really drive forward to get enough solar panels, enough wind turbines, enough nuclear, can we pull back the amount of oil and gas use to, say, 50% of where it's at? That would be a huge, ambitious goal to have. And that would mean that I'm saying West, 50% of what the West would use. That 50% would be picked up by third world countries and developing nations very quickly. And that's what we're seeing is a lot of oil and gas being shipped offshore and being sold to other markets, while they're being curtailed at home markets. And that doesn't make any sense. It's the same thing that you used to see here, and still to some degree here. You see that in Canada, they wouldn't buy Alberta oil and gas, but they would bring it in and ship it in from Saudi Arabia. Now, if you're an environmentalist, you'd go, that is so aggressively toxic that you're going to use like bunker fuel ships to transport oil and gas products that we could get just from home. So that's the world we live in. And that would take also not only that you have people that ideologically want this idea to push forward, is do you have people have the capabilities of doing this type of project management? And of course, right now you say there's no one. I can't see anyone in current governments that would have that skill set. And that's something we have to take into account whenever we're looking at who we want to be in charge of things. Do they have any background of massive logistics scale programs to be able to pull any of this off? These are the questions we should be asking, not like if someone's nice or, oh, they're saying nice things, they seem very friendly. We need to be looking for people that are absolutely competent and at the top of their field in order to try to pull any of these things off. That's me rambling a little bit about that. But let's move into a second article here, which is from the Jerusalem Post. And this is an interesting take, and I'll let you guys read it. I won't go through the whole thing, but China's strategic silver takeover. Now, I would argue, because we're talking about silver today, you could sub in pretty much anything there. You could put copper, you could put rare earth, certainly put vanadium. You couldn't put the nuclear. Canada's up there, and of course, Kazakhstan is up there. But they are aggressive in their silver desire because they are the number one solar panel maker. So this is an interesting take from the Jerusalem Post, where it's showing the growing demand for silver, and we see it in Canada that there's a big, huge push by especially BRICS nations to invest in commodities, less interested in U.S. dollar. That's also a huge story, and we keep on talking about BRICS and what's this news flow going to be in October, November from them, but that can't go unnoticed as well. The storing of commodities, because they know very well how much it's going to take. And I don't mean just in silver, but how much food they need, how much they need of iron ore, how much they need for any of their massive expansions that they're going through. And even if we have a slowdown, which, inevitably there's ups and downs and waxing and waning of economy, it's unlikely that they are going to stop pushing forward. They have long-term goals. and we should as well. And I wish that we could get people on side, at least to some degree, to agree on. And we're getting there. And we are getting there. I don't want to seem too pessimistic. I think more and more people are coming on board saying, let's tone this narrative down and acknowledge that if we can agree on, would you like cleaner water? Would you like cleaner air? Is there a better way we can do it? And let's not just scapegoat one industry compared to another, because all it does is I could point out to all sorts of industries that are absolutely horrible for the environment, but no one wants to talk about. I mean, you could just point to AI alone. Its energy demands, crypto, most of it has been complete fraud. And the amount of energy that takes, you think, well, that could have been energy to a small country. Why is it being wasted on what was essentially mainly fraud in the past 4 or 5 years? So we'll move along from the Jerusalem Post article, and we'll look at something here a little bit more fun and interesting. And we don't have an article for it because it's just more of an interesting article I came across. I just want to mention it as far as if you asked AI what the price of silver is going to be at the end of the year. I asked GPT because we use that occasionally. It didn't really have much to say. It said that at end of this year, it would still be around possibly a 30-year range. It gave a bullish and a bearish kind of number. Not very accurate. It's kind of telling you exactly what you'd think. All depends on interest rates. It depends if we go into recession, all of those wonderful things. But it did have a more aggressive number for 2025, which was interesting. And if you look at, say, they have an article here about Meta AI, and they asked it for a prediction. And they said, Meta AI platform has drawn upon available predictions by analysts like Keith Neumeyer, the CEO of First Majestic, who we mentioned, and they estimated between $30 to $55 by 2025. And even ChatGPT recognized it was going to be well over 30. Now, that's easy to say. It's almost 30 right now. That's not really saying much. Now, 55, though, that's a bigger number. According to Llama 3.1, it said that it could hit $100 per ounce, quote unquote, eventually. Which, once again, that's not really relevant. I mean, of course, eventually anything, it'll hit 100. It could take 100 years. But is there a scenario where there is this silver short or silver squeeze? Yeah. And actually, there's a great video to look at, and it's Palisades Radio. A lot of you who follow me and certainly follow anything with commodities knows what Palisades Radio is. There is an interesting 45-minute discussion just lately with David Jensen. And it was actually Andy Scheckman promoted it and said, hey, check this out. This was an incredible conversation. Check it out. It's an interesting take. He goes really in depth about the possibilities here with silver. And I want to hear what your thoughts are, because we've got lots of people who've seen they've been in this market for decades. They know, they see the ups and the wanes and the waxing and waning of the market, and see what they think, because it seems to me that whenever you have major, and I mean world events, so say the US coming off the gold standard, Bretton Woods changes or anything like that, there's significant shifts and changes. Or when you're doing something, say in the 70s, you saw, the U.S. was in a rough shape, and it was a very challenging time that actually mirrored what was going on today. And I'll leave a lot of the social stuff, but we have basically the same types of people, just more extreme, doing the same types of things out there in a high interest rate environment, high inflation environment. Now, not as high, and certainly it could go as far as it did in the 70s, but it was a significant changing period of time, and the U.S. was getting ready to build up into another phase. Now, the argument out there is that this could be the fall of the West, which is entirely true. There's a lot of good arguments that that's the case. Or is it that this idea of build back better requires a total destruction to build it back better, which would be the assumption. If you want to build something back better, you have to fully end and destroy that which is there to build it back. And that, when we've mentioned before, is not unlike saying make America great again, except the Build Back Better means that it wasn't working, and the Make It Great Again means that we are on a right path. And those are interesting philosophical and political discussions to add, maybe for another day. So we like to just figure out, though, with silver, what's the situation here? And there's been some volatility here. If you look at the charts, if we look at the full year, listen, you've done exceptionally well. I mean, it's back in October last year, it was down as low as like 21, and we're up at 29. That's huge, and that's for silver. This isn't, I look at a lot of precious metals as being like inflation kind of things or wealth preservation. It isn't necessarily something that you go, I want to like make money on this. But since we've got into this space, and I've said before, I'm not a gold bug by nature. I'm not at all. I like to watch markets that are unloved, not paying attention to, and then fit that into a macro theme. And the case was that, listen, there's enough financial changes happening here that requires a strong foundation. Never mind the case for base metals and electrification of the future, the energy transition, all these things that are going to happen to various degrees, whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter. Does it mean we're going to be all green by 2030? No, that's silly. The whole notion of net zero is silly. That's a silly concept. It's more marketing PR and sounds neat. But that's beside the point, is that there's a concerted effort to try to do things cleaner and greener. But possibly within that whole movement, there's something more nefarious, and that would be an interesting conversation. And these are the conversations we'd like to take more offline with people when they're so interested to see your thoughts, as I touched on a bit with the ESG type of thing, where, once again, I don't mean to bash on, say, ESG or any of these kind of movements, because like all good things that are well-intended and start off maybe with a good idea, they can be destroyed, perverted, changed, destructive, and everything else, or certainly hurt. And that's just that fine line between having common, let's say with unions, like you couldn't make an argument that unions weren't good because they helped workers, provided safety. You look in the 1800s or early 1900s, it's clear that they provided a very necessary means to help the workers and the people, and that was a strong, good indication and movement. Could you now make the argument that they also curtail and they're very unhelpful? Sure. They're less because their main good has been used, and they're still there, and which there should be. There should be someone fighting for workers to make sure that they are taken care of. After all, they're part of your country. They're a hard, solid base that makes things possible. But can it also be used to be a terrible function of stopping all economic growth? And of course, yes, it can be. And like all things, it's trying to dance that fine line between doing things properly, right, making sure that people are taken care of, and providing wealth to overall people, to try to build up more opportunity for most people, rather than pushing it further ahead into a globalist elite group that we've been seeing in the last certainly 2 decades. I mean, as the advent and the adoption of technology opened up the entire world stage, it meant a siphoning of money to the top 0.1% and less for the average person. And with a lot of good of people saying, oh, I can get a cheap TV off Amazon.ca now or Amazon.com. What did I give up for that? And how, does the fact that I save a little bit of money on some electronics, what did I have to give up for that future? Well, you gave up jobs. You gave up growth of manufacturing and industry. We also gave up mining. We also gave up production and smeltering and everything else. And it's easy to look back in the past and make that comment within a rearview mirror. But I think today, those that are looking to lead us have to look at these types of things and really define what is going to be, what's going to work for us in the West. And that recognition of we should come first before we consider others, I think, is an obvious thing. And more people are waking up to that as they're finding their lifestyle and their daily life becoming much more burdened by some of the decisions being made out there. But once again, in all things that are challenging, and this is a challenging time, there's opportunity. And we've seen that already with precious metals. We're going to see it continue. Even though the volatility is high, and it's if you're trading it, it's hold on, it's you're puckering up sometimes for sure because it is challenging. There's huge opportunity. So is there a chance it gaps up? Yeah, it could. We love talking about it. I don't see anything happening in the next year that wouldn't give a nice year chart for precious metals. I hate trying to pinpoint exact prices. That's not my kind of game. We look at things macro and on a larger scale. And I would argue certainly there isn't anything that seems negative for someone to be considering looking at gold and silver. And we put out a bit of a Twitter poll the other day, and I'm just going to look at it here and try to see if I can bring it up. I can find it. Yes. So we looked at, if you were to look at gold, what do you do for long-term investment, short-term trading, or wealth preservation? And there was a clear winner, and it was long-term investment. And then that was 50%, 38% wealth preservation, which makes sense. And 13% looked at it as short-term trading. Now, those of you who are quick and good at math, quickly adding up numbers, you'll notice that equals 101%. That's something very interesting. I'm curious as to how that works on a Twitter poll. Maybe we're more accurate. We're 1% more than accurate. But anyways, I'm joking. But that's kind of what I would expect to see. People look at this as long-term, as a wealth preservation. And that's certainly been the case lately, fighting inflation. Those who had been investing and taking little bites here and there have done exceptionally well. And I'll just kind of wrap this up by saying, I remember back whenever the big cannabis and weed deals were flowing back here, and I was talking to family offices, and I said, listen, this is a very boring conversation, but if you just took your money out of, just say your just cash supply. So if you're just sitting in US dollars in the bank, 30-day rolled over treasury bills or something, where it's just near-term cash, so you're actually losing money on that. Even though they're saying the inflation rate is this, you're really losing money more than likely. If you had put money into, say, gold, and just sat in that, and I don't mean physically buy gold, you can, but if you just put it into an ETF or you just kind of followed that market, you would be so far ahead than you would be if then holding in whatever dollar denomination you want. And certainly that would be the case. So we like to talk about precious metals because we think there's big news coming. We don't think there's any mistake that the BRICS nations are in big discussions. I don't see any real love developing between a lot of countries out there. Certainly not Russia, Iran, North Korea, China. None of these countries seem to be a big open door policy, and rightfully or wrongfully, I'll leave that out. I think there's good cases for both, but that sets up the stage for opportunity for people. And I think you have to start looking outside of regular news and MSM and look at some of these people that we talk about here. Check them out. A lot of these people are very bright. They spend all day researching. And that's whenever you have access to and willingness to look outside the box and to really go into something, that's a lot better actually in the long run than if you're stuck as an analyst, say someone like me who worked at Merrill Lynch. You're trained specifically a certain way, and what's real information is what's not, and maybe it isn't. You can end up believing your own BS very quickly, and this is a period of time where thinking outside the box seems to be doing very well for people. Let me know your thoughts. We covered a whole range of different ideas here on my little rant, but love to hear what you think. What you think is silver's going up? Do you think it's got a good sign before Christmas? Do you think 25, it's in 2025 by the end of the year, it's going to be up at 50, 60, 70? Love to hear your comments. And we'll hopefully have a great weekend, and you too. And we'll talk to you next week. Everyone, take care, and we'll talk to you real soon.